Hello guys, welcome back. Now today, I'm going to be talking about Paul Byron, him getting suspended 3 games for his hit on MacKenzie. With Paul Byron's 3-game suspension, what was the hit actually like? Was it dirty, clean, and does Paul Byron deserve that 3-game suspension? Now, during the Panthers vs. Canadiens game last night, Paul Byron collided with MacKenzie pretty hardly, and Paul Byron went straight into MacKenzie head, and of course, that was a pretty dirty play, and that one induced a lot of attention from the NHL, and of course, here we get the suspension. Now, this whole play started by MacKenzie getting behind his own net. Now, the puck was behind his own net. He was trying to clear it from his own zone. He ended up slapping it, trying to get it out of his own zone, and then Paul Byron comes in and absolutely hammers him in the head. But he came in, and once he went for the head, it was a snap of the finger, and he was right there. With MacKenzie, he was a little bit vulnerable on that play, I would say. But Paul Byron, pretty much, when you look at the GIF and when you look at the video, he was going straight up. He was almost pushing off of his skates to be able to push MacKenzie head. And of course, this is a big no-no when it comes to the NHL. Now, when we look at this play and we look at this hit, I think it was dirty, but I'm not quite sure that it was intentional. Now, after this suspension was announced, Paul Byron went on Twitter and said a statement about this whole situation, and I think it explains the part, and of course, the side of Paul Byron here. Now, Paul Byron says, "I accept and respect the decision made by the Department of Player Safety. I would like to make it clear that I had no intention on causing injury or finishing my check through MacKenzie head. I think my history and the way I conduct myself on the ice shows a lack of intent to injure other players." Now, he also goes on to say that despite the lack of intention, I have to accept responsibility for my hit and realize the result of the hit was to the head and caused injury. I would like to sincerely apologize for my hit and wish MacKenzie all the best and hope this is okay. I have learned a lesson through this and will make sure any future hits result in a clean and legal fashion. Now, Paul Byron might just be completely lying here. That is completely possible, but that statement and that apology seem pretty genuine to me, so for me personally, from what Paul Byron said here, I'm going to go on his side here and say that it wasn't intentional. Again, it still was a dirty hit, but I'm not sure if he meant to do that, even if it did look pretty bad. Now, when it comes to Paul Byron's suspension history, he has no fines, he has no suspensions, so when it comes to the statement the NHL makes here, it's a pretty big one. Again, 3 games for, a pretty dirty hit, but for a guy that doesn't have any past history with suspensions, doesn't have any of that stuff. So when it comes to the NHL, I think they made a big statement with this suspension, and having it be 3 games, I think is massive, especially for a guy that hasn't had any offenses before. Now, we know that the NHL has been cracking down on these type of hits in the past, of course, over the Tom Wilson saga and all the things that he laid upon other NHL players. The NHL is obviously cracking down on these head hits. These are the ones that they want to avoid, and of course the players want to avoid. But it seemed like the more and more these things happen, the harsher these suspensions get, which is certainly a good direction for the NHL to go to. Again, while with this hit, I'm not sure if it was intentional on Paul Byron's part. I feel like it was one of the dirtiest plays he could have made there, and of course, that was his decision in the moment. While it is a split second, that was a terrible decision for him to make, of course, with hindsight, but it was certainly really dirty and kind of looked intentional from the footage. Now, you could kind of make the argument that maybe Weegar left himself a little bit vulnerable there, and that's something that I don't really get, and I'm not really convinced as to that, because even though Weegar might have left himself a little bit vulnerable, you can't really blame the guy for getting absolutely slammed by Paul Byron, and while, again, I don't think it is intentional, that still was a very, very, very dirty hit, and of course, after that, we saw Weegar on his stomach. He was almost moveless, so it obviously shocked him quite a bit. Now, when it comes to what I predicted this suspension to be, I predicted 2 games for this. Once we heard about the hearing and about this whole thing happening, I was predicting 2 games the whole time, and I thought that was pretty realistic and pretty well served for Paul Byron for this suspension. But for 3 games, while it is only a 1-game increase, that is still pretty huge for a guy that, again, has no prior history with suspensions and doesn't have any of those dirty hits in his past. But with Paul Byron, while I don't think it was intentional, it was definitely a dirty hit, and I'm glad the NHL did suspend him for it. But with what Byron says in his statement and in his apology, I don't think we'll be seeing too much more stuff like that happening with his play. And again, with Byron, I think he's had a pretty decent career up to this point. I think he's a pretty solid guy, and we've seen that before in his contributions off the ice. So when it comes to Byron, I think that was more of a split-second decision that obviously backfired on him, but I don't think we'll be seeing him getting in those situations too much longer. I think this suspension will really get to his head, and while Byron might not play as physical now, he'll probably play a lot safer, which will be good for a lot of other players' heads. Now with this whole situation, I'm just hopeful that MacKenzie is okay. I'm hopeful that he can make a return in the NHL because that hit looked nasty, and it definitely looked like he had a lot of pain in him. When it went to the hits, he went right down, he was on his stomach, and we didn't see too much movement from him. So I'm hoping that Weegar has a good recovery. I'm hoping him a speedy recovery because coming back from that hit is definitely not easy. But again, I'm hoping that Weegar is okay. I'm hoping that we see him return back in the NHL, and I'm hoping that this suspension is a statement for a lot of NHL players and is a lesson for especially Paul Byron, especially with this suspension. I'm hoping that it is a lesson learned for a lot of NHL players and especially for Paul Byron, and I'm hoping that we don't see any more of these hits ever again, and I think that would be pretty optimistic, but hey, a man can hope. But of course, with this video, I want to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments down below. So let me know, what do you think about the suspension? What do you think about the hit on Weegar? Do you think it was dirty? Do you think it was clean? And of course, what do you think about the 3-game suspension? Was it good enough? Do you think it should have been more? Or do you think it should have been less? But if you guys want some more Grav videos, you can watch this video where I talk about the new Edmonton Oilers trade rumors and if they're going after big name forwards. But that is going for today, guys. If you guys did enjoy, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. Again, comment down below your thoughts on the suspension and if it was fair or not. And I'll see you guys in the next video or stream. Goodbye.